At last, the spawn of Scott Summers and Jean Grey. Do you know why you are my greatest prize?
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full X-Men 97 episode 3 video. There were a whole bunch of Easter eggs. They confirmed a bunch of our theories, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, I'm doing videos for all the episodes. Be sure to subscribe to get them. We'll just start at the beginning of the episode, work our way through shot by shot, talking about Easter eggs and WTF moments, so careful for spoilers if you have not seen the episode yet. There are a bunch of comic book references during this too. The actual episode title is Fire Made Flesh. It's a reference to Madelyne Pryor, aka the Goblin Queen, when she says the X-Men shall know her Inferno. Also a reference to the Phoenix Forge because of Mr. Sinister's master plan to gain all the powers of the Phoenix and create this Omega-level super powerful mutant in Baby Cable. A lot of this episode changes Cable's origin story a little bit, but it's pretty close to the comic book version of the origin story. I'll explain some of the differences when we get to that part of the episode. This time they changed the X-Men intro scene again. They keep updating it every single episode with new scenes. This time they added a scene of the X-Men fighting Magneto in his old suit at a military base. They added a scene of Sunspot running through the alleyway into the fence. That scene used to be Jubilee running into the fence in the original intro. And when the screen transitions with Wolverine claws ripping the frame in an X, instead of it transitioning to Wolverine with his claws from the original intro, they swapped it for a scene of Professor X on board Lilandra's Shi'ar ship with her and Araki, her chief advisor. He was also part of the original animated series. This is also to remind you that Professor X is still alive out there, but a lot of these scenes are meant to be references to the Phoenix and the Dark Phoenix arcs from the original series. That's why he's wearing this jacket, looking none the worse for wear. We will probably see him come back at some point or them reference him because there were more references to the Shi'ar Empire during this. Cyclops was even referencing his father Corsair from the Starjammers, so they'll probably show up at some point too. There's a new scene from that Phoenix arc on the show with Jean Grey going full Dark Phoenix. There's a new scene of them playing basketball, Gambit and Rogue joking around, trying to kiss each other, and her kissing him through her hand so she wouldn't sap his power, just to remind you about the love triangle they have going on with Magneto right now. In this time, they end on the scene of Morph seeing a vision of Mr. Sinister to reference everything that happened with his backstory in Mr. Sinister during the original series and everything that's happening with Mr. Sinister during this episode, revealing him as the big villain this season. Basically confirming all of our theories.
A new breed of perfect creations will be born this night by my will and genius.
The actual opening scene picks up moments after the real Jean Grey supposedly stumbled to the X-Mansion with Beast examining her, with the fake Jean Grey, clone Jean Grey, aka Madelyne Pryor, Goblin Queen, examining her with her mind. She sees vague flashes of the X-Men's past. This is her using her power to stop someone. This is her during the Dark Phoenix arc in the second version of her comic book suit. Cyclops holding her. This is a scene from an actual episode that even if you don't remember all the original episodes, you remember this scene from all the memes. This is probably just the animators for the episode, the writers having a sense of humor. This is another scene from the Dark Phoenix arc in the original episodes. This is also from an old episode in the original series. This is from their wedding during the original series, and this is a new scene. So generally just a lot of visions of her past from those original episodes. They start to dig in deeper into who's the real one and who's the clone, talking about how her awareness was only born yesterday. She sees the real Jean Grey waking up in Mr. Sinister's lap, then escaping through the woods and making her way to the X-Mansion. Notice this Crazy Eddie store in the background is also the one from the first episode. Crazy Eddie was also a real-life business in the 1980s that got shut down for doing super shady stuff. So them using Crazy Eddie for these scenes is just meant to be a sort of a meta joke to those brand of stores in the 80s. She sees the trial of Magneto, the events of episode 2 basically, on all the TVs, and then makes her way to the X-Mansion. Madelyne Pryor also gets a flash of Mr. Sinister and his gem in her forehead to reveal what's really going on. That she is Madelyne Pryor and it's the real Jean Grey on the couch, which is what we thought, like the real Jean Grey showing up, like, oh my god, they're actually doing the backstory behind Cable in the comics with Madelyne Pryor being the one to give birth to him. Morph makes a Jane Doe, Jean Doe joke and changes into Spiral from the original series. She was an enforcer on Mojo World. This is also meant to foreshadow Mojo coming back in the series. I think that one of the episodes is going to be a Mojo World episode this season. There are a couple moments like that in this episode where they're making references to important characters from the original series, but also foreshadowing what they're going to be doing in future episodes. Like, oh yeah, by the way, remember this, it'll be important for later. Notice Beast references using gamma rays to examine the real Jean Grey's blood, bit of a reference to the Hulk.
Nothing harmful, low levels of gamma radiation.
That can be harmful.
But the radiation's mostly gamma. It's like, I was made for this.
Maybe we'll see a version of the Hulk at some point during the series. Supposedly there's going to be a ton more cameos. There are even a ton more cameos in this episode, but like we said in previous videos, it seems like a lot of the cameos are actually just Morph changing into the other characters. So it's a very clever way of doing cameos. He finds out that the DNA inside Madelyne Pryor is way younger than the real Jean Grey, revealing her as the clone. There are a couple notable changes here with the way things go down with Madelyne Pryor and the real Jean Grey. So in the original version of Madelyne Pryor's backstory, she didn't start out with the same powers as Jean Grey. She was just someone who looked exactly like Jean Grey, like had the same biology basically without the powers. She didn't really get her Goblin Queen powers until later after she made a pact with a demon. And originally, when they introduced her in the comics, the real Jean Grey was thought to have been dead. She didn't have the real Jean Grey's memories. She always thought she was a completely different person named Madelyne Pryor. Cyclops has a relationship with her, they have the baby, then eventually the real Jean Grey does come back. They have the whole Cable backstory. On the show, they sort of simplify some of this and make their own version of it, but it's somewhat close to the comic book version. They treat the revelation of the real Jean Grey and Madelyne Pryor as a huge betrayal on her part, like Madelyne Pryor starts freaking out on them. She starts to hear Mr. Sinister's voice through the baby monitor, revealing his psychic control over her that he sort of built into her when he cloned her. They've referenced Bishop coming from the future, again like his time band, to remind you that he does come from the future, and to foreshadow that one of his teammates will become Cable, like Cable is one of his friends. The adult version of Cable will also come back during the series eventually, because this episode literally sort of sets that up. Notice in the background here how Cyclops is tending over the real Jean Grey, like things are going to be a little awkward between the two of them for the next couple of episodes. Beast says his trademark catchphrase, "Oh my stars and garters." He says it all the time in the comics in the original series. They also had him saying it during the live-action X-Men movies too.
Oh, my stars and garters. Scott, you have to get Nathan.
Oh, my stars and garters.
They figure out that Mr. Sinister is behind everything, who starts to appear inside Madelyne Pryor's mind, like he's not actually here in the X-Mansion with her. When he says he wants to usher them to their royal destiny, he's talking about reigning over the Shi'ar Empire too, because in the comics, Cyclops' father, Corsair, is a member of the Starjammers from the Shi'ar Empire. Also in the comics, Cyclops' other brother, Vulcan, becomes Emperor of the Shi'ar Empire eventually. He's also just generally referencing the power of the Phoenix Force and him creating her to usher in Cable's creation to gain control over the power of the Phoenix Force through Cable to create this perfect, super powerful mutant. That was his real master plan, to sort of engineer this super mutant. She starts to really lose it, and the green energy coming from her is probably their way of differentiating her from Jean Grey when they eventually are on screen together battling each other. It's also a bit of a sly wink at Mr. Sinister's green energy coming from his lab, too. She has a bunch of different visions of her marriage to Cyclops, the broken picture to represent her mind breaking and slowly turning evil, being twisted by Mr. Sinister, at least for a little while. This photo is actually based on a piece of real-life comic book art. This is her and Professor X before he left the planet, and her old comic book suits, both the main one from the animated series and the second version of the suit from that Phoenix arc. She starts to really lose it and gives herself the Goblin Queen outfit from the comics and throws all the X-Men into this alternate reality, messing with their minds like a messed up Danger Room scenario. And they go full Shining, but they do make a bunch of references to different horror movies. A lot of the monsters popping up, like the elevator monster the Beast sees around the mansion, references to Stephen King's Shining, the Shining movie. When they leave the Danger Room after a random training session, notice the readout, it shows the date and time. This is so that they know how much time has passed, and obviously to set up the bit with Rogue and Magneto. But the timing here, Saturday 4 to 6 p.m., also a reference to the original X-Men the Animated Series being a Saturday show, but it aired during Saturday morning, so it was like a Saturday morning cartoon by the end. This 4 to 6 p.m. time block, though, is a reference to the original Fox animation block that the show aired on when it first started. The 1990s Spider-Man the Animated Series and Batman the Animated Series also aired during this afternoon programming block. There's actually a pretty good chance that they're going to bring back Spider-Man the Animated Series at this point, that version, because it sounds like they're going to be doing more during this 1990s era set during X-Men the Animated Series, where all the X-Men 97 episodes are happening. Then they noticed the schedule showing that Rogue and Magneto are going to be spending a lot of time training together, getting real quote-unquote physical with Wolverine and Morph, just making fun of Gambit. All the X-Men then start to see a bunch of different hallucinations from Madeline Pryor. Sunspot starts seeing anti-mutant hate on the movie that he's watching with Jubilee. I think this is meant to be a bit of a Videodrome Ring reference. Like, you could think of it as a reference to the Ringu movies with a version of his mother, like the monster, crawling out of the TV. Notice the popcorn that they're eating is also Jiffy Pop, which was a big brand during the 1980s. They still make it today, too, so you can actually go out and buy this brand of popcorn right now. They make a bunch of Morph jokes, seeing Wolverine in the shower, who creates Wolverine claws on himself, when he says in Mr. Sinister's voice, as if I don't know, what he knows is that Morph is kind of into Wolverine, but obviously Wolverine isn't gay. When Gambit sees Rogue and Magneto, this is a reference to a comic book cover here of them in the Savage Land, like this was a real comic book cover. That's why you see all of these vines and plants all over the place. Rogue references Gambit's origin story growing up as a thief in the swamps. They actually did that origin story and showed what happened in the swamps when he was growing up back during the original episode, so you can go watch that right now. And because this is a big Mr. Sinister episode, Gambit actually grew up in those swamps as part of one of Mr. Sinister's crews called the Marauders. Like, Mr. Sinister was behind that team. So there is a deep connection between Mr. Sinister and Gambit. Eventually he turned good and joined the X-Men though. A lot of people were also confused about why Magneto was able to touch Rogue after last week's episode. He can use his powers to create an electromagnetic layer, like a really tiny shield of energy around his body, so that she can feel the pressure of him touching her, but he's not actually touching her skin to skin, just because of that tiny little barrier that he's creating. That's why there was the blue spark. Morph sees Mr. Sinister again, not again, referencing his history with Mr. Sinister brainwashing him during the original episodes. If you don't remember what happened to Morph in the original episodes, all the X-Men thought that he died in the first 2 episodes, like literally at the very beginning of the original series. But he survived. Mr. Sinister found him, then brainwashed him and used him to lure the X-Men to the Savage Land, where he was going to try and set up this whole Cable arc with him using Cyclops and Jean Grey's bloodline to create the super mutant. Bishop has visions of Shard, his younger sister, from the future, claiming he abandoned her, but the whole idea is that he's been stuck in the past, trying to find a way home. Eventually, he does go back with baby Cable at the end of the episode. This person that Sunspot is hallucinating is his mother yelling at him all about this idea that he hasn't told them that he's a mutant yet. His powers start to manifest a little bit more. Then they travel to Hell, not the real Hell, just a vision of Hell, but this is the dimension where Mephisto rules in the comics. But we don't actually see Mephisto during this episode, just a bunch of random demons behind them. Beast references a bunch of different classical books. Dante's Inferno, a reference to them traveling through the different levels of Hell. When Beast says, "Beware the Jabberwock, my son," that's a reference to a Lewis Carroll poetry story called The Jabberwocky, because Beast, like I said, is very well read. A lot of Beast one-liners in this episode. Bishop pulls a fastball special with Wolverine throwing him so that he can catch Beast, and Bishop and Cyclops has this really cool combo of their powers where Bishop has the ability to absorb and redirect energy, so Cyclops just soaks him with his I-beam, giving him a huge power-up. They actually did versions of this in the MCU during Avengers Endgame, the original Avengers movie, when Thor blasts Iron Man a couple times with his lightning, just giving him huge power upgrades. This is basically the same thing. We see a demonic-looking Sentinel, like final boss form Sentinel arising, and then the real Jean Grey wakes up and saves them using her psychic abilities to block Madeline Pryor's powers, because they're basically saying that they have the exact same powers on the show. Maybe not the same Phoenix powers, like they're not really clear about that. Madeline Pryor has memories of the Phoenix, but you don't actually see them conjure the Phoenix power at all. All the different abilities that they use during the episode are just like their regular mutant powers. Notice the real Jean Grey's powers are color-coded differently from Madeline Pryor's green-looking powers, also to remind you who's doing what on screen together. Notice the subtitles for the episode at this point are still calling Madeline Pryor the clone Jean. She does wind up giving herself the Madeline Pryor name at the end of the episode, though, like, call me Madeline. She also starts speaking a little bit with an accent, too, I think just to make it easier to tell them apart on screen, but it's the same voiceover actor who does the voice of Jean Grey that's doing Madeline Pryor, so it's like the same person voicing each character. She gives herself the name the Goblin Queen, which is from later in the comics, like it was part of a later arc. So they're kind of speedrunning the Madeline Pryor to Goblin Queen storyline from the comics. She goes back to Mr. Sinister's lair, taking baby Cable with her, and weirdly, for some reason, Rogue and Magneto show up and weren't affected by Madeline Pryor at all. Like, they come out of the danger room having no idea of what just happened, like, hey everybody, what's up? No idea why they do that, like why the danger room would somehow protect them from Madeline Pryor, other than to have to avoid dealing with the Gambit jealousy thing till after right now. Morph does a little PowerPoint tutorial on Mr. Sinister for Sunspot. This is also meant to be for new audience members who didn't read the original X-Men comics or didn't watch the original animated series episodes, just to remind them who Mr. Sinister is, what his abilities are. Notice Morph also changes into his appearance from those later X-Men the Animated Series episodes when he came back, a minion of Mr. Sinister. A lot of people asking why he doesn't look like that either. I think probably in the context of the series, in present day, he's just meant to look more like he does in his natural state, sort of like what Mystique is meant to look like naturally. Everything that Morph says about Mr. Sinister's backstory is pretty accurate to his comic book origin. He was born in the 1800s as Nathaniel Essex as part of a very prominent family. He becomes a contemporary of Charles Darwin, becomes obsessed with evolution of the fittest, the evolution of the human race. He learns about the existence of the X gene through his experiments about the existence of mutants. Then he winds up meeting Apocalypse eventually, who alters his genetics, giving him the white skin, his current appearance, all of his powers, makes him functionally immortal, basically. So the whole idea here is that Mr. Sinister was not born a mutant, he was given those powers by being mutated by Apocalypse. Then we go to Mr. Sinister's actual lab, and he explains again what his plans are for Cable and how he intends to use his genetic potential to create this new master race of super powerful mutants once he perfects Cable with the technovirus from the comics. This is another change to the comic book origin of Cable. So in the comics, Cable was infected as a baby with the technovirus by Apocalypse, who himself had been infected by the Phalanx. As a baby, Cable was sent to the future where they would have technology capable of saving him, which they kind of do in this episode in a slightly different version. So that's why Cable is their son, but technically from the distant future. He's born with all the same basic powers as Jean Grey, like telepathy, telekinesis. His telekinesis is a little bit more powerful than his telepathy, though. When he was growing up, though, most of his power was used to suppress the technovirus. Later in life, though, he is able to harness his full power more freely. So the whole idea is that right here, Mr. Sinister is planning on using the technovirus to evolve Cable into like this crazy powerful level mutant, but they stop it before he can finish that. We get a bigger battle between the X-Men and Madeline Pryor. Really great animation during this episode too. Morph changes into Magik from the New Mutants, who we also saw during the New Mutants movie, played by Anya Taylor-Joy. This is her in her original suit from the comics. Magik is also the younger sister of Colossus. Morph changed into him last week. Maybe we'll see him come back this season. She mind controls him, and he starts fighting the X-Men using Magik's current comic book form. Also really love the fight scene between Magneto and Madeline Pryor, with all the metal from the stained glass flying around. Notice how she throws it back at him using her telekinesis, and that's also why she's able to injure him, breaking past his electromagnetic shield, because he is super powerful on the show. But it seems like on the show they're saying that her powers are about the same as Jean Grey's powers, and Jean Grey is way more powerful than Magneto, which is how Madeline Pryor is able to injure him. When she says she should have him as a toy, that's also a bit of a joke, like a bit of a wink about the X-Men toys in real life. Like you can go out and buy him looking like this as a toy right now. Sort of like them winking from behind the camera because this was a Saturday morning cartoon, and Saturday morning cartoons used to just be glorified advertising space for toy lines. They've had a bunch of jokes about this on all the Rick and Morty episodes, like please buy our toys, buy our merch. Generally, the reason for that, though, is that classic Saturday morning cartoons didn't really make that much money in terms of advertising. Generally, all children's programming doesn't make that much money from advertising. Most of the money they make for all that children's programming is through the merchandise, like the toys that they sell through the episodes. Like, oh, by the way, we have all this merchandise that costs a ton of money. Please spend every dollar you have on it. Really good example of this, even though the Marvel movies in real life make billions and billions of dollars, they make way more money than that on all the merchandise that they sell based on all those movies. They get super hardcore with Madeline Pryor here too. She uses the blood to paint her lips a deeper shade of red, enjoying the taste, then kisses Cyclops with the bloody lips. Back at the X-Mansion, the real Jean Grey uses her powers to try and stop Madeline Pryor just to get her to chill, and they have a bit of a psychic battle between the two of them, with Wolverine also tending to the real Jean Grey, just showing you some of their relationship history too. Madeline Pryor sees visions of the Phoenix, of her original home when she was a child being visited by Professor X coming to take her to the X-Mansion. They did a version of this in live action during X-Men The Last Stand. They show her powers manifesting for the first time. They also did a live action spin on this during X-Men Dark Phoenix with the Sophie Turner version of Phoenix. We're supposed to get the Famke Janssen version of Jean Grey coming back during Deadpool and Wolverine. When they show all these different pictures here, all these are based on actual comic book covers in real life. They have a bit of a psychic battle and they're relatively evenly matched. I think the real Jean Grey is probably a little bit more powerful, but she winds up using the memory of baby Cable to stop Madeline Pryor, who does have real feelings for baby, at least she really does care about her baby. She winds up being the one to save Cable from Mr. Sinister, wounding him, reminding you of his regeneration powers. When Mr. Sinister says that they've doomed the boy, that's a reference to the techno-organic virus that he's infected him with. Lady Bird Fly Away Home, also a reference to his mental triggers that he used to control her, and a reference to the Phoenix Force just in general. He escapes, don't worry, he'll be back, he's supposed to be the main villain this season, and then Beast explains the techno-organic virus, which is basically the comic book version of the techno-organic virus. This is all just meant to be that part of Cable's backstory from the original stories, just done in the animated series in a slightly different way. Basically, it amounts to the same thing though, like they have to send him to the future with Bishop, who is returning now because they'll have technology in the future to help stave off the techno-organic virus. When he says he knows somebody from the future who's capable of building anything, that's meant to be Forge, who shows up later in the episode to help Storm. Cyclops references his absentee father again, Corsair of the Starjammers, probably to remind you that we'll see them again at some point this season, maybe with Professor X and the Shi'ar characters. Some of you also picked up on the awkward reference here too, like it's kind of funny but in an awkward way when Cyclops yells at everybody saying, "Don't you know what it's like to feel abandoned?" If you think about it, all these characters, like all the X-Men, even Magneto, have been abandoned at some point in their history, so they all know exactly what it feels like. But even though it is a bummer to see Cyclops lose his son, Cable, eventually Cable will be back on the series, and in the comics, they did meet. Cable revealed the truth to Cyclops that he was his son, so they did have that reunion eventually. Madeline Pryor, back in street clothes, says goodbye to her baby, Cable, because it is literally her baby. She does genuinely care about him, then leaves the X-Mansion to try and figure everything out on her own, just like process all of her trauma. So I think the idea is that she will be back eventually. Maybe she'll join the Hellfire Club at some point like she does in the comics. And she gives herself the Madeline Pryor name from the comics, but in a different way than she got it in the comics. Then we see the real Jean Grey go to have a heart-to-heart with Cyclops, like their actual reunion finally, to start dealing with everything that just happened between the two of them. Then we find out what happened to Storm. She went to Dallas, Texas, and she's just hanging out in a bar. The Mockingbird name might be a reference to Bobby Morse from the comics. They did her character on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and they just made Hawkeye's wife the MCU version of Mockingbird. Notice she's got the mohawk. The outfit also references to the comics. We also saw the mohawk Storm during the Age of Apocalypse storyline in the original episodes in an alternate timeline in a relationship with Wolverine. Then we see Forge, who's come to find Storm and help her get her powers back, referencing his history with Professor X. I think the reason why she didn't recognize him is because they didn't actually meet during those original episodes. But it is funny that Bishop literally references him like, "Oh, I'm taking your baby with this techno-organic virus to a person in the future that can heal him, but that person that he's taking him to has just come back to the past." During the outro with this character selection screen, it's the same one from last week. It's based on the one they did during the original series outros too. There were a whole bunch of Easter eggs and references during the episode. They speed run a lot of this whole Madeline Pryor story arc, but she will be back on the show eventually. So if there are any Mr. Sinister Easter eggs or references that you spotted that I didn't talk about in the video, just write them below in the comments. But we will also see Mr. Sinister come back too. Right now, they're planning on doing at least 3 seasons of X-Men 97, so even if they don't completely wrap up everybody's storylines, that's why, because they plan on doing it more during Season 2, Season 3. My full X-Men 97 Episode 4 video will post next week after they release it. There's a bunch of stuff happening this week too. They're also releasing a Spider-Verse short film called Spider Within. I'll do a video for that next, so be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss that. Click here for that video. I'll update the link as soon as I post it, and click here for all my other X-Men 97 episodes. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.